everybody. Welcome to our program tonight. The schedule of the day, we'll have a Bootstrapping AI Companies webinar with Brad, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. The presentation for today is called Bootstrapping AI Companies, and bootstrapping a business is the art of getting that business to the point that it produces cash for you while spending minimal cash yourself. Bootstrapping is the opposite of the classical Silicon Valley strategy of raising massive amounts of capital before building a product or obtaining customers. It is the underdog path, starting at the bottom and fighting your way up, instead of asking someone to pull you up. In this talk, Brad will discuss what he has learned about bootstrapping AI companies. How do you produce cash as quickly as possible? How do you get customers on board before you have any algorithm or product? How do you inspire people to work alongside you when you cannot pay them? Brad will discuss these issues in context with some of the new AI products he is working on. Brad is an entrepreneur and AI enthusiast. He started programming at the age of 12. His interest in AI quickly started to grow when he created several AIs for an obscure open source game video called Globulation 2. Later in life, Brad got involved with Sensible Inc. as a startup's very first employee. He developed a deep learning solution for processing receipts that outperformed industry veteran AB. Then he moved on to Electric Brain, a startup he sold not long time ago. Recently, he started a couple of ventures, but I'll let him tell you more about that. Maybe one of his most important titles is AI Geek's Honorable Founder. He was our very first speaker 3 years ago, and he returned 4 or 5 times ever since. Most of his presentations are recorded, and you can have a look at them on our website. That's about it from me. Now I will stop my sharing and I'll turn the control to Brad.
All right, thank you, Dragos. Let's share this thing here. Actually, maybe I'll show my face and wave for a second. Are you guys able to see me? Hello, that's me. Now I'm gonna share this screen of the actual thing. Sweet, okay. Bootstrapping AI companies. I'm so excited to have you all here, and I hope this is worth it. So let's just get into the details. I've got a second monitor here. I've got the Q&A open on the left-hand side. So you should be able to see that. So I'll be able to see any of your questions, and I want to keep this interactive. So I'm going to be stopping for questions regularly, so feel free to jump in at any time. So part 1, introduction. So I felt like before going into maybe some of the learnings that I've experienced over the years on the various projects that I've been a part of, that maybe I just actually give you a background on what those projects were, and maybe you can get a sense of what my experience level is. I'm no Richard Branson, and I'm not gonna say I have all the answers, but hopefully putting it in context is helpful. So first, some of this Dragos actually already said, basically. But yeah, I've been doing AI for a long time. I've been doing artificial intelligence. I've been obsessed with it first ever since I played Age of Empires, and I figured out that you could create a script that you could modify the way that the computer plays the game, and then later Globulation 2, where I actually started programming in BASIC, but then went on hold for almost a decade, and it kind of came back out again in Sensible. I've been, and so just a few other quick notes. I didn't actually take engineering as in school. I took a business degree, had the fun. But I really do know a lot about computers. I've been programming them for quite a while. And that's also has advantages and also challenges. Um, and I've worked on a lot of businesses over the many years that I've been working around computers. Recipe search engine was something I created when I was 12 years old. I literally created this recipe program for my mom, but then I burned it to CDs and started hustling it to everyone around the school. And Halifax computer repair, fuck, every nerd starts with computer repair because it's so easy to sell. Add delete. Add delete was a oh boy. Okay, so add delete was basically what Patreon is now. I had thought of it back then, but I was way too inexperienced. Like I had no clue how to start a business, and probably the Patreon person. I haven't really looked into when they were founded, but I bet they were founded around the same time. But I call it add delete because you would pay money and to the owner of the website. In exchange, they remove the ads. Yeah. Okay. So Jim Miller's got a question here. I'm actually gonna put this question to a little bit later. Funding's an interesting question and bootstrapping. Fundamentally, you're trying to avoid the funding. Frankly, you're trying to self fund. So this question actually is going to be answered in the next few slides. So let me get to that. So anyhow, yeah. So these are my first early attempts. Stuffler is probably the first time, actually technically, that I went full time on any startup, but it only lasted 6 months. Really, where it all came together was. Oh, I actually skipped one. I guess Sensible. But I wasn't a founder there. I was just an employee. But that's really when I got all of my experience on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I kind of went from just being like maybe like a hack programmer to someone who could actually create things. But in terms of entrepreneurship, Electric Brains is definitely the one that a lot of people know me for, and really the first business that actually worked for me. But what I think a lot of people may not realize is that it mostly failed as a business. Like it kind of only like 10% worked. Originally, I was trying to make this whole AI engine related to automated machine learning, and you're just pumping your data and your labels, and it does the rest, and it will expand and self-optimize the neural network, and fucking everyone's doing it nowadays. But back then there were actually still a bunch of people doing it, but it's kind of an obvious thing to do, frankly. But I tried to do it too, and it did not work at all. It was a really shitty business. If you spend any time trying to build developer tools, you'll quickly realize programmers don't want to spend any money on anything. Like they love free stuff, and an engineer will take free 9 times out of 10. And so not a great business, honestly. And I'm not the only one to have tried it. Like a few local businesses have folded up, literally trying to target the same market here. But I pivoted. So fundamentally, I didn't give up on entrepreneurship itself, which is probably the most important thing. We pivoted the company, and I just started focusing on doing basically custom projects. Like, it was kind of boring. It's not that much better than being an employee, but you have a lot of freedom and you get to charge a lot of money for fairly small amounts of work. So it was pretty good. At the end of the day, we didn't go bankrupt, and I got to sell Electric Brain last year. So I'm still living off that money right now, frankly. Breaks Analytics. So Breaks Analytics was the first time where I really tried to make an AI product that actually would require data and sort of like a custom algorithm, not one of these things of like, oh, we'll run your, my algorithm on your data, like, auto machine learning and, TensorFlow and all of that nonsense. Bricks Analytics, what we were trying to do was to make a product that would analyze your shopping habits while you were in the store. And the key for the Bricks Analytics, it's sort of, I guess Amazon Go is like scaling up, and you know they have these stores where you can go in and buy stuff and walk out really easily. But retailers actually don't really care about that much. Like that's kind of exciting, but in terms of something that we actually had an actual retailer telling us, I would pay money for this now. They just wanted the analytics, like the boring thing that everybody's been talking about for 20 years. The problem is the analytics is really hard. In this instance, what we wanted to analyze was like, were they grabbing a box of cereal off the shelf, and like how long did they look at the box of cereal, and like did they twist around, and what kind of body gestures did they show it to their partner, or discuss it over, how long were they holding it in their hands, and like all sorts of very detailed analytics about like the physical in-store shopping experience while you're at a store. This startup is really where the first time I actually confronted the challenge, most of the challenges that I'm going to be talking about later in this webinar. This is really the first time that I saw the fact that the challenge of data in building a startup and how that can really hold you back in a bunch of ways, and how your co-founders have to be on board with the necessary strategies for building an AI business. And not all co-founders are, like, both for the bootstrapping, but also just for AI startups in general. It's a little different. So Bricks Analytics was a real lesson there. Now, Swiftly AI. So Swiftly AI, what we were trying to do was we were trying to set prices on big, complex buildings. It's been done in residential. Like if you have a home, you can go on Zillow.com, punch in your home address, hit enter, and it'll pop out a price for you. And Zillow's really good. Like I've run some measurements on Zillow working on Swiftly. Like they're really accurate. Their predictions are pretty amazing. So Zillow's a real, but Zillow can only do that on residential, and it's partly because residential there's such a large amount of data. A huge number of homes are being sold. They're all very similar to each other. Like the sales are going to be very recent. Generally, it's a large liquid market. Where the AI came in and brought a real advantage was actually bringing the automation towards the larger, more complex buildings. So with this AI project, we would analyze the documents, like the leases and the financial statements of the building. And we would compare it to, say, other leases and other financial statements of other buildings that we've seen, and the relevant statistics and metrics. And again, this startup though, I saw the challenge that I'll be getting into more later, is that having no data is a real hindrance. We built a fully working product. Like it was ready to go. All the algorithms were in place, and we had a little data. Like we had like a few hundred samples. We had above zero, more than zero, but we didn't have enough that you would expect any reasonable level of accuracy. It's just enough to verify that the code works, and observe overfitting in practice, and move on. And so Swiftly AI was a real challenge. And it was a big lesson, and it really molded my beliefs about what the right process is for building an AI startup. And again, I'm going to be getting into that soon. So I love the whole like putting suspense. Again, sorry if I guess I'm coming to the end of this section, but if you guys have any questions, this is now the last slide of this section. So post up any questions, and we can move on to them pretty quickly. Koala is my latest product. It's my latest startup. Basically, with Koala, I finally had all of the lessons in place. So instead of building a product that inherently required data, the reason I went all in on Koala is actually because I realized it didn't really require data, or at least it didn't. It's kind of complicated. It's reinforcement learning, so but it doesn't really need data. Like its data is your software. It's not, that being said, we can collect data, and like we expect that it will get smarter over time. The model will be pre-trained and it'll be able to work off the shelf. So it improves with data, but it doesn't require it. On top of that, I also started building the data set basically from day one. And I really stress the importance to co-founders. Sorry, actually, this last sentence is really cut off. So let's, I really missed, I forgot to type the rest of the sentence. So let's focus on this middle point. So first we actually started building a data set. So I knew the data set was a big challenge. I interjected a lot really quickly. And I encourage my co-founders to reach out to their friends and anyone who had data. And we actually put out a call where we basically offered money for people to sell us their code bases, which in Koala, code bases are data for us. So we put out a call to try and get the data. We literally offer people cash, not a lot of cash, but just enough. And this third point is cut off, but I strongly encourage my co-founders to try and get deals without the product actually working. And that, I'll try to get into why that was relevant in a second. So this is my past experience. You know, it starts at, you know, teenage businesses that were kind of a joke, but, you know, kind of fun. And then moving on towards things that kind of gradually, this is a services business, you know, consulting, anyone can do that, man. Like freelance, it's easy. Then Bricks Analytics, my first real AI product, Swiftly AI, the first AI product that I got so close on, and Koala, we're actually already in market and we're starting to make money. So it's exciting. So that's the background. Lessons learned, AI businesses, they're different than, you know, traditional SaaS. Like you can go read a book from like Andreessen Horowitz or, sorry, those are two different people, Ben Horowitz and what's his name, Andreessen, whatever. But yeah, you can go read those books, but like that advice, it's no longer relevant. Like the SaaS era is behind us. And AI companies, they are, startups at least, they're fundamentally different than the software as a service applications that we see in the previous era. At least they are now. Maybe 30 years from now, AI will feel a lot more SaaS, but right now it's something special. Bootstrapping is just hard. But it's very satisfying. I have to emphasize this very empowering point because although it's much more difficult to get deals and to make money, when you do, it feels good. Like you feel like a god, and you just feel like you're like I own this. Like, I just closed the deal. You know, it's like I'm gonna go watch Glenn Ross right now. So and bringing in cash obviously is so important. I'm gonna get more into this. Yeah. So let's look at some of these questions here. So Mark Ryan, great examples. Were there any of the examples that would have turned out differently if the base technology were more mature, or were the issues really down to lack of data or cheapness of the developers and non-technology issues? So both in the cases of Bricks Analytics and Swiftly AI, both of those cases, it really came down to a lack of data. In Bricks Analytics, we had a way of collecting data, but we basically like could install video cameras in our own apartment and like record ourselves and, you know, feed that all to the algorithm. But it was really bad quality data because you wouldn't expect that to translate to a real retail environment. Swiftly AI, basically the company that has the data we need, that they like their entire business is selling this data. Altus, like that Altus and CoStar, that all they do is sell this data, but they refuse to sell it to us. Like they actually wanted us to sell our business to them. They're like, join our fucking octopus monopoly. It was kind of weird. So so to answer Mark Ryan's question, out of the product businesses that I've built, Electric Brain never needed data. It was just kind of a shitty market. Bricks Analytics and Swiftly AI both needed data that we couldn't get, that we really just couldn't get. And Koala, we actually designed it so that it didn't need data, but just to be safe, I started collecting the data anyhow. And so those were all lessons. And how do I do this? So I can answer live. Now I've answered, done. Okay, perfect, sweet. So now I answer this question. You mentioned that starting an AI company or selling an ML product is mostly impossible without data. What are your thoughts on engaging clients through a free proof of concept or demo, acquire their data, show that it works, and then start the subscription? This is an absolutely great idea. And in fact, we tried to do this. It can be challenging. The product needs to deliver people value. Like even if it's free, like if it doesn't give them value, then they're doing you a favor by using it. You know, if it's half broken or whatever, like this. So in order to successfully pull this off, you need to create a product that doesn't actually depend on the data, but simply gets better once you add in the data, or you can add extra functionality or features, and 100% a legitimate strategy. And actually, I'll discuss more on specific tactics on how to do that as well. Answering live, Bo Chang, what is your take for someone who wishes to start a business which utilizes AI during this COVID crisis? Well, I think the fact is it rules out one of the three strategies that I'm going to talk about in this presentation in part 3. Two of the strategies are still valid though, which revolve around mainly just doing a lot of the work yourself and not depending on the sales side. So honestly, I've been frankly struggling, to adapt Koala to the situation of the COVID crisis. So I don't think that I'm necessarily the expert or even have great suggestions here, because I think it's a challenge for all of us. But I'll get into more on what the 3 kind of high level strategies of starting an AI startup are, and one of them was kind of obviously ruled out. What's your take on product market fit or validating market for the product during an early stage? I have strong opinions on this. I'm of the opinion that until a customer pays you real money for your product, it is not validated. That is the only criteria that matters when it comes to validating a product. If you cannot convince someone to give you money for the product, it is not yet validated. That is still an idea, a concept, a fantasy. So that's the only thing you should be focused on. Once you start getting people to actually give you money for your product, I honestly think that's sufficient validation. Like, you can read books and they'll go into all these complicated techniques of like interviewing customers, or you can, net promoter score. I know people talk about, look, there's all sorts of bullshit. But honestly, in my opinion, just having someone hand me cash just feels so good. And it doesn't happen very easily. Like, you really have to do a lot of R&D to get someone to hand over cash to you. So in my opinion, when you start seeing people hand over cash to you, you've made a ton of progress towards product market fit. But do not mistake usage on a free product as validation. Free is not a business. Business does not operate on free. That's what charity and open source does. Business is for profit. So just do not assume that free usage on your free product is validation. It's not, in my opinion. And I have very strong opinions on that. Sorry, Jim, I'm going to hold off your question because it's going to come up in the next section. So let's keep going. Let's jump right in here. Bootstrapping. I think Dragos basically already kind of started talking about this in his introduction. Basically, the way I define bootstrapping, it's like doing it yourself, the old-fashioned way. It's a matter of hustle. It's a matter of hard work. It's a matter of making a lot of mistakes. It's the traditional way of starting a business. It's probably what I think when most people think of starting a business, they think of bootstrapping. It's really the raising of venture capital that's kind of an anomaly that grew out of Silicon Valley. Bootstrapping is what most people, most places, most everywhere around the world is how they start businesses. And it's only done differently in like a few places and with if you're very well connected ultimately. Um, why do we bootstrap? Um, we bootstrap. Okay, I have a whole lot of reasons here actually. And frankly, I believe in all of these reasons. You can do it at any point in your career. Like you don't need to wait until you have all that experience. You know, my dad used to tell me, Brad, you should wait until you're like, 50 years old and you're experienced, you've got money and savings, like then start a business because you can risk it. Like when you're my age, he used to say, like, but of course he's fucking retired and sitting on his cottage and like living like a lazy fuck. But sorry, I swear too much. You can start from scratch. This is another great benefit. You don't need any money, honestly. Like, it definitely helps. And don't get me wrong, I have had some lucky breaks. And when I get the money, I put it into action. Like, I use it. But you don't actually need the money. And what you need is a willingness to basically exploit your own time. And hopefully you're not dumb because, like, I don't know. You need to be pretty smart, I think, honestly, to combine that with years of hard work and still be able to bootstrap. But even frankly, I'm wrong about that. Honestly, people have proven time and time again that hard work pays off, and you don't need to start from anywhere. Requires minimal resources. This is basically the same point repeated. You can do it part-time at any level of commitment. This is actually probably an underappreciated point. People kind of assume you got to quit your job. And it is true that if you want to raise venture capital and go to investors and get it, then they want to see that you're committed. They want to see that you're all in and you're working 80 hours a week and your girlfriend's bitching because she never sees you, or your wife's complaining because she never hears from you or whatever, like, or your boyfriend or spouse. They want to hear that. But I think bootstrapping, it gives us another path. And it's kind of on your own terms. And this has played a lot of benefits for me because as much as I know that being full-time on one business is better, it's actually impractical in a lot of situations. Like we all need money, we need to have food, we need to have water, we need to have roof over our head. In modern society, we need internet and electricity and our mobile phone, which all costs quite a bit of money. So you need cash. And bootstrapping is flexible. You don't have an investor breathing down your neck telling you you're not working hard enough. You don't know boss telling you that you're not working hard enough. You don't even have to call that on yourself, honestly. Like, people have started businesses while boasting that they don't work hard, that they work 10 hours a week and then they cut it down to 4 hours a week and they write a fucking book about it. Who's that fucking guy? Tim Ferriss is okay. Actually, I shouldn't quote him. There are better entrepreneurs who have done this. And actually a lot of them, like I know a lot of freelancers who have built businesses that make, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And, they're not growing, but they don't require much effort. And fuck, could you make 300 grand a year working only 5 or 10 hours a week? Would you do it? Like, that's fucking killer. You know what I mean? That's killer. And you're not going to get that with an investor because no investor is going to invest for you to accomplish a 300 grand a week fucking business. But bootstrapping, it's all in your control. What you want the business to be and what you want it to give to you is what you're going to get out of the business. It's your decision. It's your freaking business. That's what's so amazing about it. Like, you're the master of your own universe. And when I started bootstrapping, like it completely changed my perspective about money, about the stock market, about power, and how I thought about my former bosses, like my opinion about the actions that they took and the reasons that they took those actions. It could totally changed. Why not bootstrap? Now, this is probably important that we talk about the opposite scenario here, because there's a lot of reasons not to bootstrap. Frankly, I haven't ever raised capital. So like, let's be honest here. I've been a bootstrapper my entire life. And so I'm only can describe what the other side looks like. What I can tell you about bootstrapping compared to people who've raised capital is that a lot of people who raise capital, they try 100 times and they get lucky with an investor, and they're able to then not be anxious about money, even though they know nothing about business. And they get 2 or 3 years of runway, so it's not nearly as hard. At least once you get the money. Trust me, raising capital, I've nightmare stories about raising capital that people have told to me, but once you get the money, it's a lot easier. Bootstrapping, it never goes away. That fear of collapse, like it's fucking 2008 financial crisis or 2020 pandemic crisis every single day at your bootstrap startup. Like every freaking day you're worried about a client's going to call you up and they're going to cancel a contract, and that person that you just promised 10 grand to, you're suddenly going to have to fire, and they already started the project. So now you feel bad that they did a bunch of work for you. Like it's a hustle. Like you have to keep every dollar you get in play, in motion, trying to produce more dollars. But at the same time, like there's a lot of uncertainty about that incoming income. Another huge point, an annoying point for me, one of the most frustrating points for me, is the fact that co-founders quit. It's unfortunate, but like when you have raised capital, it's easy to keep people on board. Like it's not, you have money and you're paying people, they don't have to believe in you all that much to continue working for you and to even work hard for you. Money is very powerful like that. When you're bootstrapping, everyone's a co-founder. Everyone you get involved with is in some way a co-founder, and everyone you get involved with has to have the hustle. Every single person. And so I've had a lot of shitty experience about co-founders who don't know how to bootstrap. All they've heard about is the venture capital universe, where they're going to raise a ton of capital and they're not going to focus on customers. It's just all about, what's the next round? What's the next round? What's the next round? They cannot adapt to bootstrapping. Like that's a different way of starting a business that requires a different set of skills. And kudos to them. No, nothing wrong with them, but they failed in the bootstrapping world. They did not have the hustle, and they didn't have the grind and the willingness to put the hard work in. It's a race against the clock as well. So bootstrap business is, I have a bunch of past startups now. I'm not that freaking old, so I'm still fairly young in my life. But the reason is I've always believed in this mantra of failing quickly and to recognize when something's not working. And I've found that with pretty much all of the businesses that I bootstrapped, whether it's working after about 6 months. It might take you another 6 months after that to decide that you're going to quit, to actually pull the trigger. For me, it has for sure. But I knew it like 100% after 6 months. It doesn't take long. Like if you're not producing mad, crazy, awesome results after 6 months, it ain't gonna work. Like I'm sorry, but like shit's gonna you're gonna have team problems. You're gonna, people are going to get demotivated, and then you're going to be fighting with them to just get them to work at the rate that they used to be working at. And, someone's going to drop off and quit, and you're going to have to renegotiate that. And suddenly after 6 months, you have to spend another 6 months of fucking around producing no results just to get the clock back reset so you can try again. It's screwy. So you got to go fast. And, on the bright side, you can do this several times, like I have. I have given this sort of startup thing now several shots. It's worked with Electric right now. It's working really well with Quala, but it wasn't for a while. I've had a bunch of failures, but it didn't take long. If you spend only 6 or 12 months on a startup, and you're 28 or 30 years old, even if you're like 45 or 50 years old, like, come on, like 3 years of your life, like that's really still not a long period of time. And you will learn a lot going through 5 or 6 different startups over 3 year time horizon. Like you're going to know what works and what doesn't. So there's a lot of ways, a lot of benefits there. Why did I choose to bootstrap? So there's no doubt that there was a desire to prove myself that played a big element here. Maybe it's ego, confidence, overconfidence, you could say. I felt that I would be more wealthy. Like I just, I felt that at the end of the day, the investors, unless the business was in a certain state, where, the product was ready and we just wanted to pour money on a Google Ads campaign and like, that's all we needed. Like in that case, yeah, the investor could make sense. But like, if the business is not in that situation, like that extra dilution is just not worth it. Like it's a bunch of hassle and a bunch of time. And, if I'm going to chase down 300 or 400 investors, pitch every single one of them just to get one of them to invest in my company, why don't chase down 300 or 400 customers, pitch every one of those customers until you get a customer to buy your product? Because that sounds like a fuckload better than pitching 400 investors. Because once you get 400 customers, now you only need to pitch 10 investors. Like once you get that first customer, you only need to pitch 10 investors to raise capital. And frankly, why even raise the capital? Because now you're making money. So, I chose to bootstrap because I thought I would actually be wealthier. And has it worked so far? It hasn't not worked. Like, there's a lot of people that tell me I should have just moved to the Silicon Valley. I have an uncle that lives there. He made a fuckload of money in the Valley at some networking switch company. It's an option, but, I didn't want to leech off of him. And frankly, the point number one still stands: desire to prove myself. I'm like, entrepreneurs are starting tech businesses in Canada. They didn't have to move down to Trump land down there. I should be able to figure this out too. And that some of those Canadian entrepreneurs, they're doing it without money. I should be able to pull that off too. Like there's definitely that element, that desire to put myself among that other crew of people. That's what drives me. Like that I don't know. That's sort of like very Nietzschean desire to elevate yourself, to be the Ubermensch. If you've ever read that book, that is a big driver for me for sure. So, if I can do it myself rather than raising capital, it better fulfills that desire. So, part 3, AI bootstrapping. And before I'm going to get into this, I'm just going to double check. So, Jim Miller. So, answering your question. Getting funding must get easier once you establish a good reputation. What do you need to do when it's the first time? So to answer your question, Miller, unfortunately, it is actually my first time. I have never raised capital. I've sold a business, but I've actually never raised capital. I sold the business. I owned it, not 100%, but it was like 98%. There were a couple other advisor shareholders who also got a bit of cash there. What I'm here to discuss today is actually getting funding from customers. There's probably going to be the more relevant point. If you can get customers to pay for your R&D rather than investors, you are in 100% better spot. And trust me, it's a lot easier than you might think it is. You just need to get the right pieces in place. So, boom. E. Abraham, answering your question, or answer live. Did you charge your potential client on day one? At Electric Brain, I did typically, I would not do free work. Like I wouldn't do any free discovery. Me, like, writing the proposal, like basically the proposal's free and anything that's required for the proposal comes free. But frankly, I got that whole process down to like 6 hours. So it was just like one call with the client, first draft of a proposal, second call with the client to confirm details, second draft, I'd have a friend review it, I'd fire that off to the client. And that was as much work as I was going to do for free. Otherwise, you start billing. So that's as much as I can answer that question. I hope that answers that question. So if that didn't, try to maybe add another question and try to provide it more detail. Okay, so jumping in here, AI bootstrapping. Oh, well, I just saw a question actually. Hold on. Bo Chang, how do you get your teammates or co-founders for your business when you bootstrap? Do you offer 2% of your business for their time and their expertise? Great question, and this is complicated. Equity negotiations, obviously a very touchy subject, and I will give you my, actually, I'm not going to put this. I'll give you my thoughts right now on equity negotiations. So here, the only two things matter in a startup: time and money. A person who's willing to put more time in should get more ownership, and a person who's willing to put more money in should get more ownership. If a person said that they're going to put lots of time in, but then don't, they should have their ownership clawed back. And if a person said that they were going to put a lot of money in, but don't, they should have their ownership clawed back. If they didn't put in any money or any time in, no ownership. Time and money are what matters. So if you're offering this person 2% of the business to co-found you, what I'm going to ask you is how much money are you expecting them to put in, and how much time do you expect them to contribute? And what is the relative value of that money and that time to your business? And you need to be absolutely clear, because you can have a co-founder who comes in at 2%. You can have a co-founder who comes in at 5. You could have another one that comes in at 15. You could have another one comes in at 25. You could do a 50-50 split if you want. But if all that matters in terms of that negotiation is how much money are they going to put in and how much time are they going to put in. Those are the two things that vote. And time actually gets even more complicated, because once you start drawing a salary from the business, there could be negotiations there. I've heard of situations where, you know, a co-founder has a child and needs to draw a larger salary. You don't have a child, so you can draw a lower salary. And that means that they're going to take less ownership in exchange for taking that larger salary. You know, so there can be complicated questions. At 2%, you're looking mostly at like an advisor. 2% would be like an advisor, but like a good advisor, like one who can open doors, you know, who knows some really rich, powerful people, who knows some, you know, politicians, or, you know, someone who can get businesses open for you, you know, people who command like 1,000 or 2,000 person companies. Unless the advisor is up to that level, I wouldn't give them 2%. They're not worth 2%. Typical advisor, more like 0.5%, honestly. So that's, and to answer both your questions, Bo Chang and I'm so terrible with names. I'm Torontonian, but I should be better at this. Sepide. How do you find co-founders? I think both of you asked this, so I'm just going to jump in here. This is really hard. In practice, all of the best co-founders who have come to me through referrals and word of mouth. I'll put out a feeler call to all of my entrepreneur friends, and I'll ask them, hey, do you know anyone who's looking for a co-founder right now? And inevitably, you're gonna find someone who's off their last startup that just wind down. You know, 9 out of 10 startups fail, right? But that doesn't mean that those entrepreneurs are bad business partners. Some of them are. Some of those startups failed because the entrepreneurs really are bad. You want to avoid those. But some of those, most of them are, they're decent entrepreneurs, but they're just shitty business ideas. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone, and there's a lot of benefits to finding someone who's just hot off their last failed startup. You can evaluate how hard they worked. You can evaluate like the analysis behind their product. How detailed was their thinking? Why did it fail? Are they good at reasoning and thinking back over their past and reflecting on their past mistakes and learning from those past mistakes? Additionally, you can find out whether they're a hard worker or not, which is like very important. Trust me, most people who tell you that they're going to work hard, they're fucking lazy as balls. Like, they are not hard workers. So that's a very frustrating thing that you're going to find. Like, for the people who are actually hustlers, when when you meet another hustler, it's like magic. Like I've churned, unfortunately, I feel I've through a bunch of co-founders, and only like 3 co-founders have really like met the fucking bill. Like my co-founder basically for the last 3 months, Swiftly and Koala. My co-founders on both Swiftly and Koala I've loved, but before that it was a fucking nightmare. Honestly, it took me a long time to get this. You have to find other entrepreneurs, and they have to have demonstrated past entrepreneurship. That's the only way. Like if they tell you that they want to be part of a startup, lovey-dovey, and they've watched this documentary about Google and it looks so fun, fuck that person. Okay, shove that person to the side. That's not who you're gonna co-found with. You want to find someone who sounds like they were in the weeds. Like, I worked my ass off and, we had to hire all these employees and, we fired them again because, we ran out of money and it was super emotional. But then, we somehow survived. You want to hear some war stories. You know what I mean? Like, you want to hear that this person is committed and that they have gone through shit, and that now that when they join your startup, they're gonna grow. Like you're getting top end material of someone who's got real experience. But you also like there's a bit of a game here, because once someone's got enough experience to actually start becoming successful, and then they become wealthy or powerful or whatever the fuck they want. I don't know what it is that you want, but whatever it is, they start achieving those goals, and you'll find most of those people, they don't want to partner with people who have not hit that level yet. So there's a weird sort of hierarchical tiered system that you'll get into. So you have to find someone who's got that past experience, but who's not so good that they're above you or like they're on another league. It's like, for me, it's like dating a woman that's too hot for me. You know what I mean? Like co-founders it's a lot like the same thing. Like once someone's too successful, you can't really go for them anymore. But I do not partner with anyone who doesn't have that prior experience in startups. That's probably enough. I'm going to jump in on the presentation here. Okay. Whew. Okay, maybe I should drink some water. The AI product playbook. So I've refined this strategy after a lot of startups. And not just my own startups, like during my consulting days at Electric Brain, like I worked with a lot of other AI startups. So I've seen this strategy and sort of the thinking behind it play out a bunch of times. The essential winning strategy, it kind of looks like, I don't know if you've seen a lot like that Amazon wheel where he's just like more customers equals more warehouses equals faster shipping equals more customers and blah, blah, blah. There's an equivalent like that for AI, but it's not based on the logistics of warehouses. It's based on the volume of data that you have. It looks a little bit more like Google, I suppose. Although Google had just a magic algorithm, nowadays their search engine is entirely dependent on machine learning and just historical data. Like they wouldn't be able to keep up the same accuracy level. So building an AI product, this is what it comes down to. Like it comes down to building your data set, using that data set and an algorithm for a product. And if that product based on that algorithm is really killer, is really awesome, you're going to get more customers. And with more customers, the customers generate the data as they use the product. So this is going to, this sort of wheel, as if you can get it going, it's sort of like an internal combustion engine, if you know what I mean. Like, it sits there idle, it does nothing. But once you get that piston going, it kind of runs by its own. It starts spinning and bursting, or whatever the word is, combusting. So you have to get this playbook going. The problem is, in the beginning, it's really freaking hard. All startups have this problem, but our traditional SaaS startups, like fintech and all of that stuff, they don't have this left problem, no data. They can build the product. Like if you have the money, you can build the product basically from day one. In certain AI startups, even if you have the money, if you're not bootstrapping, you can raise $100 million of capital, certain data sets are just really hard to get. And I'm going to give you a case in point. I worked with a company that did heart analytics, and they were basically trying to make an algorithm that would take your ECG and diagnose you for various diseases. One of the diseases that they wanted to diagnose was heart blockage. I can't remember what the official word is, but it's like blockage in your arteries related to cholesterol, and it builds up on the walls and it gradually constricts the veins. It's the standard thing that you get heart attacks from. So anyhow, to actually building the device and taking the ECG is obviously super easy. Like it's like an iPad attached to some microchip. Like it was a cinch. Like it was basically a software business. What was difficult is not the ECG, it's getting the label. Because getting the label for that ECG for your machine learning algorithm, getting the answer or the result, that required you to do a surgery, to actually go in and do a biopsy, take a little piece of artery and see how much cholesterol is in there. So this company could have millions and millions of dollars. It's still not easy to round up thousands of surgeries and to do them all in a consistent manner, in a way that can be FDA approved, and to and even if you can get thousands, which they actually did, don't get me wrong, they actually got several thousand is still on the small end when it comes to machine learning algorithms. Like usually you want like 100,000 or 1 million. So you're still frustrated with this problem. There's no data thing. It doesn't happen in the classic SaaS world. It doesn't happen in fintech, but it is a huge problem for AI startups. Whether you're bootstrapping or you're doing, or you're raising capital, it's a foundational sort of blocking issue. So what do we do? What do we do to get around this? So here's the formula that I basically learned is you can actually interrupt each of these 3 points in different ways to get the flow moving, to get around the problem. On the left here, we have the strategy of gathering data. Excuse me. Again, this is actually not applicable in all startups. Like even if you raise a bunch of venture capital, in some cases, it's not actually possible to gather your data. But usually most AI startups, like if they just had enough money, there is some conceivable way that they could build the data set. If you're doing some image recognition thing, you can do all the Googling yourself. And I know it could take weeks, even months of tedious effort, but you could put together the fucking data set yourself. It's not impossible. So one of the ways to bust the paradox is to just literally build your own data set of yourself. Now, this has a bunch of problems. First is that your data set's biased, insanely biased, which means your algorithm, even if you get quote unquote 90%, that is a biased 90%. And in the real world, you're probably not going to get anywhere close to that level of accuracy. The other, of course, being that it can be very difficult to get photos or to get certain types of input datas. You got to build the tool for labeling the data, but it's an option. And we're partly taking that option at Koala, where we are in Koala, our data, quote unquote, a single row of our database is actually someone's entire code base, because we analyze their code and there's dynamic runtime analysis there and a bunch of stuff. But we are doing this. And on past startups, so maybe going one by one, is Swiftly AI, our data involved a lot of documents, and we did gather and just manually built the data from our first early advisors and partners. We basically begged them to give us all of the data that they had, and they went through their Google Drive and their Microsoft OneDrive. They pulled us some old flash drives. I literally got, I shit you not, WordPerfect files. All right, WordPerfect. That company went bankrupt, and I had this appraiser in last year, 2019, sending me appraisals that he had done in WordPerfect to contribute to our freaking data set. Okay, so it's an option, and it doesn't cost money. It's not always an option, but in a lot of AI startups, it's an option. Second, on the right, make humans the product. This is a kind of a classic AI startup technique, and I think if there's actually like a trope, a kind of a running joke about AI startups is that under the hood they're just like Indian outsourcing teams or Philippine outsourcing teams, and they're not wrong. Like those jokes have merit, frankly. So, but honestly, it's a valid way to start an AI business because A, you can start making money from customers from day one, and B, you build the data, and not only that, you build the labeled data while making money, like while selling it to customers. So it's a win-win-win all around. And a lot of AI startups, in fact, the majority, I would say, take this right strategy, this make humans the product strategy. That's probably more common. Like by far is the most common. We did it at Sensible. I've seen that at HubDoc. I've seen that at, God, how many places have I seen it? I've done it several times at Electric Brain. I've done it on Scotiabank projects and other stuff. Like the human in the loop formula, it always works. It's a lot of work on your end. Stan AI. We did this at Stan AI as well, where Stan AI is hilarious. What these guys would do, they had a chatbot, quote unquote, but they actually literally just routed it to their cell phones. And I shit you not, I've watched these guys when they're answering the messages, they would put in like they would talk like a bot. Like they would pretend to be a robot, even though they were humans, answering the chatbot messages. They would put it like, please hold, and like, they would put in like dot 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 and hit enter, and like it was nonsense. Like it was crazy. But like doing that, it I know it sounds absurd, but after 6 months of doing that, they had a data set of around 10,000 chatbot entries that they were able to then build an algorithm off. And it wasn't a small data set. Like that was divided over a number of intents. Like there was like maybe 250 per intent, but still really good. It was really good. And like, so if you're willing to hustle like that, like you basically just take a services and consulting business, gather the data of you doing that services consulting business, and then gradually introduce algorithms to automate it. Now, here's the bottom one. Now, I've had no luck with this, but I know people who have had a lot of luck with this. If you're a good salesperson and you need to be good, or you have a good salesperson, you've partnered with a good salesperson, trust me, they need to be good, like no lazy people, or they just have a large Rolodex and they're wealthy and powerful or something. I don't care, but it's not easy. There are a lot of AI companies that basically just close deals with nothing. They pitch the dream or the vision, and they get the customer to supply the data. This is kind of it's more like a black belt level strategy, and this is the strategy that I'd say is actually going to be even more difficult right now during the whole crisis with the pandemic and the virus. So this third strategy I'd say is the one that may be ruled out right now, but and I've had no luck with it. I've never honestly partnered with a salesperson who's actually good enough to close deals with no product and on smoke and mirrors. I've seen them. They're just working. If you're that good of a salesperson, like you don't fucking need anyone, man. Like you become $1 million business from like day one. So they exist. I swear to God, salespeople do exist that are good enough that they can get customers to hand them money with nothing, with no product, and money and data. I've seen it. All right, I've met people who have done this, but it's hard. So those are the three strategies. You're either building the data set yourself, which is never a permanent solution. You always have to move to real world data, but it can get you an MVP, or you're using human in the loop, or you're just willing to close deals with nothing. Like you're willing to work on smoke and mirrors. There's no other formula. And so I'm going to go into maybe a little bit more detail here. But I've kind of touched on a lot of these points already. The data first approach, it's a grind. Like if you're the type of person who could do boris, tedious shit for months and come and you don't have to enjoy it, but you come out alive and you're not insane after that, then this is probably the way for you to start a business, because no one else is willing to grind for months, and you could create the data set that no one else has, and thus the algorithm that no one else has, and thus the startup that no one else can launch. So if you're willing to grind, there are a lot of things that you can do with data that you can gather from everyday situations. Just labeling photographs. I once had this project, which I thought was a joke. We created it as a demo to try and get customers at Electric Brain, but it was basically to take photographs of cars and determine like their make and model. Like that's a Chevrolet Neon or whatever, 2008. Trivial thing. Like I thought, like I was just like, oh, here's a fun, little machine learning project. I can code this up in a weekend. I'll demo it to customers, and it'll help me close this deal. Well, months later, we find out that there's a giant marketing company that installs banners. The type of banner, when you drive on a highway, there's a big sort of banner that you drive by and marketing is played to you. Well, they wanted analytics on what type of vehicles are driving by. So that crazy thing, I could have gone in myself and collected all the photographs. It's not, cars are public. They're on public roads. You want to go photograph 1,000 cars or 10,000 cars, you can do it and label them and meticulously document. You can do it. And there are solutions that people are willing to pay for based on that data that you meticulously gather. You know what? Like no one else has got that data yet. There's speed cam companies, unfortunately, are starting to get into this game. So it is getting a little bit later for that whole car thing. But the point stands that if you're willing to grind hard, you don't even need to be technical. Like you just got to be willing to do the one thing that no one else is willing to do, to build the data set that no one else has, and you got an AI startup. Customer first approach. So this is what I said before, using smoke and mirrors and getting a customer to basically give you their data on the promise of the product. And this does get done, trust me. It's actually more common in big enterprise deals, like the one place where you might think that this is impossible. It's actually much more common with very large companies where you'll come in with your product and you'll apply it to their data set. And in some cases with some of these machine learning products, like you can build a demo that looks like it's functioning perfectly, but has literally no machine learning behind it at all. And it's more than enough to convince executives to close the deal. Now, don't get me wrong, you need an amazing salesperson. So if you are an amazing salesperson, and I don't know, okay, second point on amazing salespeople. Nothing against salespeople, but I have met a lot of salespeople who claim to be amazing, but then completely fall over when they start selling startups. There's a big difference between selling a product which is relatively complete, which is not changing, where you have a sales playbook in front of you, a manual that you can read from, predefined email scripts and phone scripts and call scripts. There's a big difference between that and selling a product that doesn't exist, that where you're selling an idea, a concept, a vision, a solution, quote unquote, to something. There are salespeople that do this. In fact, you'll find them more in the consulting industry because, again, consulting people are always selling ideas and nasty shit. So if you want to recruit one, I would look there, like business development more type people. I haven't met anyone who's actually pulled this off. I've only seen other entrepreneurs pull this off. Product first. So you can build a product that doesn't require data. That's what we're doing at Quala, where the product operates on your software. And so your software is sort of like the data. But I think it's more common, these second two strategies, whereas you're creating a product that is targeted, that solves some small problem or some niche problem, or it's incomplete, but it is useful in some way, but it gets you access to the data that you need for the real juggernaut. Like you're starting with one thing to get to the larger thing. And I'd say that's probably the more common strategy here. The last strategy, people do this. Actually, big companies, frankly, have been guilty of this. They don't, at least early days in the AI industry, of releasing products that are actually just don't work. Like they don't really work that well. But as a consequence of people trying to use the product, they upload data And then if you're really fast and you have the human in the loop really quickly, you can get that product up to speed to a point where it is working before you've lost too many customers. Like it's a hustle, and you are sacrificing the experience of some of those early customers. You know, preferably you would hope that they're on board and they know it's a beta, but you know, I honestly, Microsoft's done this a bunch of times where they literally just put something out, gather data, but you know, it's total crap where it barely works. Like, oh, fucking Microsoft products. And this was actually, so this whole product is crap thing is basically how all of speech recognition came to exist. So we wouldn't have speech recognition were it not for this last strategy where you just put out a crap product that doesn't really work and gather enough data so that the product catches up. All of these strategies are valid. Personally, I favor the first one now at Koala, where the product actually has value without any data. But as we grow and we get more data, we get a defensive mode. So these are the major strategies. You're either building the data set yourself, you're just selling smoke and mirrors, or you're building a product that doesn't depend on data, or you're just sacrificing those early customers and their experience in order to get the data. Okay, so let's answer some questions. So that's the end of that section. Muhammad S. Shahid says, so if someone who is new to this space, how do you start into the startup space? If you're 100% new, frankly, I would join a startup first as an employee. That's a little bit safer, but you know, honestly, I shouldn't say that because I dove in head first. So why not just try? Like, this is honestly, it's a lot like the question when someone asks me, like, how do you suggest I learn programming? And I actually now have a very canned answer that basically, if anyone asks me like what I suggest for them to learn programming, I'm like, first, come up with a project that you want to create, and second, do the minimum amount of programming or learning to program that is necessary for you to create that thing. Like, do no more programming than absolutely necessary. But you have to have a project in mind. It's hands-on experience that counts at the end of the day. So if I were to suggest to you, how do you get into the startup space? I would be like, just accept that you're going to be naive and dumb in the beginning and do it anyhow. Like, make those mistakes. Like, just dive in deep with some crazy mobile app idea that you have. Try to convince some salesperson to sell it or some engineer to build it, and just dive in. Like, it's not going to work, honestly, but don't tell yourself that. But look, your first start's not going to work. It took me several times. I showed you before. It took me like 6 times before I had a success. So it can take a while, but I would suggest no better way than to just dive in head first and just get the experience. And if you want to play it on the safe side, then also getting a job with a startup. I did it also. I taught Sensible. So that was an enormously valuable period for me. Sandeep asks, gather date. Will getting the data sets from Kaggle competition help create an MVP product? In practice, I have found that free data sets are largely useless for creating innovative products. And here's why. It's not that they're not useful. It's more that because the fact that they're public and free means everyone else is using them as well. So you're going to find that all of the data sets that you can actually get for free already have a dozen startups, you know, working around them. Like, there's being based on them, and like and it's now a commodity business where everyone's, you know, down to like tenths of a penny or hundredths of a penny. So, you know, I would say that yes, it is possible for you to just grind a competitive product and just fight it out with the other 20 people that are also basing a product on that data set. But building your own data set, it doesn't just help you build products that no one else can build. It gives you a competitive moat. It's like it prevents competitors, once they realize you're onto a good idea, from just copying your idea, because it's not just as easy as just writing a bunch of code. This isn't the world of SaaS anymore. It's not software as a service. That's the word. That was the last decade. This AI stuff is a new thing, and your data is more important than your algorithm in terms of giving you a competitive protection against competitors. So thank you for the question. And yeah, our data sets from Kaggle useful? They can be, but I don't recommend it because everyone else is using them too. The really innovative shit, you're gonna have to build the data set yourself. Like if you really want to be cutting edge and you really want to do something where you have a chance of changing society in some sliver of a way, like you're not going to find that with the free data sets, man. Everyone else has already used them. Like they've been milked. They've been milked. Like that, all that milk is gone. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's the end of that section. So actually, I shouldn't say that. So there is one thing that free data sets are really useful for, and it's something known as pre-training or transfer learning. ImageNet is particularly famous for this, where you can use, you first train your neural network on ImageNet, which is a database with like millions of free images, and they've all been labeled and categorized. You can first train your neural network on ImageNet, then put it on your own custom problem, and you'll actually get better accuracy. You'll get better results that way. So transfer learning is a situation where actually these Kaggle data sets are useful, but otherwise I'd say you're gonna find that everyone's using them, and they're just, the startups that you can base on them are just gonna be super competitive. Nothing innovative there. Okay, so now last section. So this is part 4. So this is just I'm gonna talk about my experience just trying to build teams in bootstrapping companies. So recruiting. When you're bootstrapping, it is not like raising venture capital, man. Raising venture capital is empowering because everyone on your team's an employee. You're the boss. Maybe if you and your co-founder or your 2 co-founders, whatever setup you have there. But there's some set of workers that are definitively on a salary-only basis or have relatively few shares. And that actually works just fine because most people want money and they want predictable cash and they don't want uncertainty. They don't want to take a risk or take a gamble. In bootstrapping, when you're doing it yourself, when you're building a business the old-fashioned way, every team member has to be a co-founder. And this is not just true on ownership. I'll give you an example. When I was working at Electric Brain, I had a period where I had tons of cash. Like I started growing and I brought on my first employee, my very first employee, that where I gave him a grace salary. He was straight out of school. I gave him $70K a year. So I overpaid, frankly. I was the first time that I could actually pay someone, and it was amazing. But I put him in charge of this important project, and I kind of assumed that because I was paying him above market, and it was way above the other offers he was getting at like 50 and 55. So I'm paying him 70, 75. Like he was flying. He was happy. So I thought he was going to work hard as a consequence. And what happened ultimately, I put a lot of trust in him, and I had weekly meetings, but I really didn't do a whole lot of follow-up otherwise. And that project failed. And I shouldn't say it failed. It kind of failed. Yeah, it failed. It basically failed. I intervened in the end, but I couldn't really resuscitate it. So we both kind of failed that project. But anyhow, the project failed. But it failed partly just because like we didn't have enough resources and time and effort on that particular project. But anyhow, I came out of the experience. I had to let him go because I basically ran out of money because the client would not pay because the project had failed, and I had to let my employee go. And so I realized that, like, even though I had hired him under this employee salary basis, the fact that I'm an early stage startup didn't matter whether he had equity ownership or not. He had to be working as hard as I am, or he wasn't going to get the salary. Like, he wasn't going to maintain that. Like, I couldn't bring in the customers to pay him the nice salary. So whether you're whether you're paying them salary or you're giving them ownership, every early team member has to have the wherewithal of a co-founder. And that is just not true of venture capital startups. And you're going to find that a lot of people that want to work for a startup, they're not co-founder material. They're not entrepreneur material. They don't have the hustle. They don't have the grind. They want to work for a startup because they want to believe that they'll get 0.1% shares and it'll be $1 billion and they'll get rich. Or they believe in that Google thing. It's like where they can kick their feet up and work at any time of the day and not have to deal with a boss and go out to the fruit garden and pick goddamn apples off the tree. And they believe in that Californian lifestyle, which is like the opposite of the hardworking lifestyle. Either way, they're not for you. Like, you need proper co-founder material. Second thing about equity. So bootstrapping, you don't have cash. It's your own sweat, labor, and brow. But the funny thing is, I've spent a lot of time studying the money and finance and economics, and equity is in a lot of ways like money, at least for some subsegment of the population that you're targeting, the ones that are willing to take a risk. For them, equity is actually kind of like money. And initially, I was very tight about equity. I was like, I don't want to dilute myself. And what if I give them 5% and they don't deliver 5% of value? What if I can't give him 10%? And what if he doesn't deliver 10%? Is he worth 10%? And it was so complicated. Now I have a much more kind of willy-nilly approach to it, frankly. It's like, if they're putting the time in, they're putting the money in, we give them the equity. But the fact is, you can get people to do a lot of free work for free by promising equity, and not losers. Like, you can get top people, like experts, like proper experts, people who are either like industry veterans or who have done startups before. You can get people who are who've actually like launched multiple successful companies just by promising equity. The fact is, actually, equity is more appealing to the successful people than it is to losers, frankly. To the people that you don't want to work with, they don't want equity. The people you want to work with, they do want equity. It's not the only criteria, don't get me wrong. There's way more criteria. But the people you want to work with, they want the risk. Like, they're gunning for it. I've gotten people to do free websites for me, free videos. I've gotten people to do Google Ads campaigns, tons of free R&D, marketing, blog articles. Like, God, not how many things I've gotten for free just by giving equity away. Like, and what's that equity worth today? None of those startups succeeded. They became worthless. But I got people to work for me for free out of thin air using equity. So don't be cheap. Don't be that person who's like a tight ass and hoarding 90% and dividing the last 10% up between all the remaining co-founders. Like, this is your one chance to get top excellent people and to get them to work for you for free. So use that equity. Top people, like being willing to give 50% of your business away versus being only willing to give 10% of your business away could mean the difference between getting a Bill Gates level person versus getting, me. Yeah, getting me. It could mean the difference between getting me and getting fucking Bill Gates. You know what I mean? So use the equity, honestly. Risk takers are willing to take equity and losers aren't, honestly. So people, the third point, people need hope and leadership. What I've found is you gotta, when you're bootstrapping, how do I word this? You kind of have to treat it more like a social movement. It's not as much about, you have to be hard on people about delivering results, which is the very next point, and will also be resuscitated on the following page. You have to be hard on people about delivering results, but probably more important than the reason people are joining is because they believe in it. It's not because, or they believe in you. Maybe they don't believe in the product, but they believe in you. That also happens. But if you try to treat it as transactional, that I give you this equity and you do this for me, that won't quite work. Equity doesn't quite work alone. It will work like money, but only if you combine it with the hope and leadership. If you combine it with, here now you're invested in the vision, but you still have to give them that vision, and you have to constantly inspire them and motivate them. And I find that actually it's a lot easier. I have more people wanting to work for me than I can actually take. Usually, it's more like we can't fit you on the cap table. It's going to be too complicated to negotiate you in with the existing co-founders, or like we already have someone like that. When you're out there pitching, like there's more people who want to join your startup than not. Frankly, you're going to be doing more filtering people out than you are going to be trying to recruit people in. If you're having a hard time trying to find people who want to work on a startup, you've got a problem, a big problem, because in my experience, the challenge is that there's been way too many people and most of them suck. And you have to filter out for people who are actually worth doing a business with. So here, now we've got a slide, evaluating fit for bootstrapping. There are a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and some of them are really good entrepreneurs who could never bootstrap. Kudos to them. They can go to Silicon Valley, and frankly, I'm often jealous of the people who can just call up their buddy and get $10 million wired to a bank account in a few weeks for some new startup that they're doing, and maybe not $10 million, but I know people who can raise capital in weeks, and it makes me jealous sometimes, but those same people also can't bootstrap. They have to give up 90% of their business. Like, they will be diluted down to nothing, guaranteed. Bootstrapping, at least you have a chance at keeping 90%. But most people are not going to be a fit. This biggest criteria is number one. Honestly, if there's one criteria that you take away from this list, it's criteria number one. Have they tried to start a business before? Don't take virgins. I don't mean that in literal sense. I just mean business virgins, like entrepreneurship. Like, you need people who have gone through it. There's just a certain, I don't know how to say it. There's a certain relationship that you have with the concept of power and with the concept of money. And most people have a very unhealthy relationship with power, with money as both concepts and as real things in the real world. And those hold them back. It held me back, actually. It held me back in the beginning of Electric Brain. I had a very self-entitled view about, I kind of felt entitled to be successful at entrepreneurship, that I was super smart and that I was entitled to this. And I think I've met a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's pretty common to experience that. So this first criteria is very important, because you want to have someone who's gone over that hump and who's no longer stuck up their own ass, and who's willing to acknowledge that they're not perfect, and also who knows how hard it is, who's seen the hustle. Literally everything else here is probably second. Have they freelanced before? This is kind of like starting a business. It's kind of like business light, you might call it. So I would take freelance and consulting experience as valuable experience because these people had to both do implementation and grind for customers themselves. So I value that, honestly. Did they have some of their own money saved up? Oh, God. So I really hate it when I meet with a co-founder and they insist that we avoid spending money on anything at all. It is very common, and frankly, we're talking about bootstrapping. So we're talking about trying to do a business with as little money as possible, but that doesn't mean zero. I'm sorry if you have zero money and you're on this webinar. I don't know how you paid for it because it's like a paid webinar, but if you have zero money, you're not going to start a business. The fact is you need at least $1,000 just to do the incorporation. But I've met people who want to be entrepreneurs who squawk at spending even like a few $100s on their startup. Like, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're getting pissy about spending a few $100, like, you're in the wrong line of business. Like, you're being too cheap. There's bootstrapping, and then there's like suicide, and don't go to suicide. So if I meet with a co-founder and they tell me, like, I talk about incorporation, they're like, oh, hold on, should we really spend that money? And I'm like, it's only $500. And they're like, oh, I don't want to spend $500. I'm like, I'm not starting a business with you. Like, I'm sorry, but it's only $500. Next, have they grinded and worked hard before? This is kind of related to point one. It's like a repeat, frankly. But you're going to find a lot of people who claim that they've worked hard, they don't know what it's like. Like, until you've grinded on a startup where you're both working hard, you're emotionally involved, and like all of your financial future is at stake, and like you've put all of your money up, it's a different level. So I would hope that you're partnering with someone you've seen grind and worked hard in the workplace. Ideally, if they've grinded and worked hard on a startup. But if they have never grinded and worked hard, oh my God, like, don't touch them. Like, you don't want someone who's smart but slow. That's not for you. You want someone who's dumb but works hard. That's more valuable than smart than slow at the end of the day, frankly. Next point. Vast majority of people who tell you this is kind of repeat. I'm like repeating all the same points. People will disappoint you. When you raise venture capital, it's kind of on you. And like, once you've got that $1 million, you can hire all the laziest smart people you want because you can pay them salary. When you're bootstrapping, it's just not like that. Like I said before, even with the employees that you are paying salary for, they need to hustle like they're entrepreneurs because their own salary depends on their hustle. Like, I didn't want to let go of Lucas. Like, I wanted to keep him on board, but I ran out of money. We fucked up the project. He didn't put the hustle in. I was busy on other shit, and obviously I could have been a better manager, but like, considering I paid what I paid him, he really didn't produce very much at all. Like, he kind of shut the bed on that, frankly. Anyhow, I'm such an asshole. Shouldn't say anything about people. Okay, so let's get to this last point. Rely on real evidence, not what someone claims or tells you. You got to do weeklies. Basically, actually, weeklies aren't even enough. I found you need to go like twice a week. And you need to be asking your co-founder, what did you accomplish? Oh, is that so? Well, did you do this? Because you told me last week you were going to do this and this and this. But now you've gotten this other thing done that, produces no results. Like, where's the result? You got to be holding people accountable. Like, this last point is so important because you're going to find this last slide here. It's literally the last slide. The most important thing is you got to ruthlessly cut joiners because no matter how hard you try to recruit a co-founder, you're going to fuck up. No matter how hard you try to choose those early employees, you're going to get some wrong. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just cut them early. Just don't hold it out. If someone was looking for a job, you hire them, but then you fire them after 1 month, they can probably go back to some of the other people that wanted to hire them, and they might be able to still get that job. But if you hire someone, they you know, you wait 6 months or 9 months before, and then you decide, oh, now they're not, you know, like they've been shit this whole time. Like I have to cut them, like, and fire them. You've made it worse for them and you. Not only now have you spent 8 months of their salary and you haven't gotten the results you want, but now they haven't been in the job market for 8 months. So you got to cut them off as fast as possible. Whether you're, and this twice as much for people you're paying equity. If you're paying them salary, they better work their ass off. If you're paying them equity, oh my God, most people you give equity to will not deliver results. You will find that most people will have to be cut. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Most people are not entrepreneurs material. That's a reality. So you got to be ruthless, and it's unfortunate, but this point is very important, and it ties into this last point. When someone says that they're going to deliver something, say next week or 2 weeks from now, and then you wait 2 weeks go by, and then they're like, oh, sorry, I had date night with my girlfriend, and I had this big work thing come up. I just can't deliver. I'm like, oh, really? Because I thought we're starting a business here, and that you own 10% of this business. So I expect you to deliver that thing that you said you were going to deliver. And if you do not deliver it, get the fuck out of this startup. All right. So yeah, rely on real evidence. People will always, they'll fuck around. I've dealt with co-founders, like when shit starts getting bad and like they actually don't have time for a startup anymore, they will start covering it up. They'll just keep saying, oh yeah, I'll get that done. Oh yeah, I'm working on it. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. But at the end of the day, they're going to start covering it up because they want to hold on to the ownership, but they know they're not putting the work in. They know it. All right. So it's you who has to hold them accountable, who has to look at the evidence, who has to say, you are doing great and I love you and stay on board, or get the fuck out. And it's unfortunate. When you raise capital, it's not nearly as problem because you have money. But when you're bootstrapping, you got to be ruthless. When you're giving people equity, when they don't deliver results, that's just a drag on everyone. That's a drag on everyone else who took the equity but did deliver results. You don't deserve to keep them on board. Now, contrapositive here, so I sound evil, or I don't know, maybe a different word, but the people who do deliver results, you really have to nurture them. You got to love them because honestly, they're hard. They are far and few between. Even if they're not the smartest or not the fastest, if they deliver results and they deliver the results consistently, that is more valuable than anything. Nurture those people, reward them. So on Koala, for example, I actually gave my co-founder the majority. My current co-founder, he has more than I do. He has 60%, I have 40%. And the reason is, it actually has more to do with trying to bind him into the startup and to make him work really hard than anything else. And it was an incentive in a way to encourage him to work hard. And frankly, my 40% is not worth nothing if he doesn't get his ass out and sell it. So why bother? Why should I try so hard to hold on to 90%? I mean, yeah, I built the prototype and the MVP, but I don't need that extra percentage. At the end of the day, I need a team who's going to go out and sell it and is going to make whatever percentage I still do own at the end of the day worth something. Because getting your shares from being worth zero to being worth anything at all is a huge milestone. It's like very important. And then going from anything at all to being worth like a huge number is, it's almost easy. But going like Peter Thiel has a whole book on this concept, like 0 to 1, where he talks about just getting that first batch of customers is an order of magnitude harder than getting the next like 1,000 customers. So people who deliver results, anyhow, coming back to the team thing, you got to nurture them and you got to reward them. You reward them with equity, reward them with money, reward them with prestige, like talk about them, like play them up. You got to reward that loyalty. But you got to cut people who don't. And that's it. That's all I have for this extended version of this webinar. I hope that was valuable for you. I hope I was able to give you some of my past experience with startups. And yeah, let's like jump into some questions here. So, wow, they've already popped up. Sweet. if you're working on your startup part-time and it's only you for now, how do you know when in the process to consider the start date for your business? It's a little bit arbitrary. So I'll tell you a bit of a story related to this point. When I started Electric Brain, remember how I told you in the beginning I was a little bit entitled and I didn't have that work hard sense. So the way that I started Electric Brain, it really was a dipping my toe in the water process. In the beginning, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I was having trouble with motivation and commitment. And the very first thing I did was I rented a co-working space called Acme Works. It's not even a popular co-working space, but it was cheap and I liked the space. It was very open. And I didn't even go the first month. I paid like $300 and I didn't even go. I forgot about it because I was lazy and entitled at that point in time. But at the end of the month, I checked my credit card bill. I'm like, oh my God, that co-working space. Like that was supposed to be my commitment device. That was going to get me working on my startup. So the next month I start going to the co-working space, but I don't do anything. I'm watching YouTube videos, but I pull on my laptop there and I chat with some of the entrepreneurs and I watch some YouTube videos and I'm like, okay, I'm progress. I'm at least coming to the office now. So I'm closer to my goal. And then I'm like, okay, after about a month of doing that, I'm like, well, fuck, I'm paying for this space. I'm coming to the office. I should at least write some code. And then I had to come up with the product. So then I'm like, okay, well, what product am I gonna fucking create? I literally had no idea. I wanted to start a business, but I didn't even want to create a product. And it kind of built like that, where it steadily went from like this sort of like lazy, half in, half out process to where my commitment to the business gradually built. You know, one day, okay, I spent an hour writing code and you know, next week I'm writing an hour code every day. Then the next, and then sooner or later, I'm fucking slamming it every single evening to finish this product. And it snowballed. And I don't really know when the start date was. Was the start date when I quit my job to go full time on Electric Brain? Is that when I started? I don't know. Is the start date when I went to Acme Works that first time? I didn't even know I didn't even have a name for it when I went to that first co-working space at Acme Works. So was that when I started the business? So I don't know. What do you define as the start point is kind of arbitrary. But reflecting back, I think the most momentous thing is when I went full time. Like that's how you know it's serious, because it starts to screw with your emotions and you're like, oh my God, all my money is now dependent on like this being a success. So that was probably a really big moment for me. Gerardo asks, you talked about how your relationship with money and power has changed. Do you have a book recommendation on this subject? It's difficult because honestly, there's only one book that actually covered the subject, and he didn't even discuss it in a way that I liked. But there's a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Maybe you've read it. It's from a Californian venture capitalist. He's like super famous, Ben Horowitz, I think, or maybe it's the other guy, his co-founder. One of those two. They wrote that book. And in the book, he spends a lot of time talking about the struggle. And the struggle is, I didn't get it when I read the book, actually. I read the book and I thought it was kind of stupid and useless. And it was only after I kind of 6 months later and I'm out of money and I'm borrowing a ton, basically struggling to survive, that I suddenly realized what the struggle was. And over the subsequent couple of years, I've refined it a lot more, and I've come to understand it's leadership. Leadership is a struggle. And how did it change my relationship with money and power? I came to have a lot more respect, frankly, for people with money and power. Maybe I came to appreciate just how difficult, not Donald Trump like where you inherited it, that guy's an asshole, but like, you know, genuine people who've worked for it. Like I started to have an insane amount of respect for it. And the thing that caused me to have the respect was the struggle. So in terms of a book, the one that comes to mind is going to be The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and just focus on this concept of the struggle. He doesn't actually describe it very well, but I now know what he's talking about. Like I got it. And when you want to recruit a co-founder, you need to find someone who knows what the struggle is. Just ask them, like, have you experienced the struggle? And if they like stare blankly, like, fuck that. Daniel asks, have you ever had difficulty figuring out how to balance working on a business idea and doing implementation versus studying and going deeper into the theory of the AI you want to implement? My personal feeling on this is that you have to be very practical, very hands-on oriented, and I have always focused on being very practical and very hands-on. So for me, have I had to figure out how to balance it? Not really. I only ever studied something as needed to solve a problem for a goal I wanted to accomplish. I only listened to those audiobooks about sales because I was in the gutter and I needed to close a deal. I only read all those AI blog articles because I needed some new ideas on how to improve the accuracy. Like I only did the learning as needed to solve business problems. And that's actually probably a key value of bootstrapping, is that it focuses you on the shit that matters. And it forces you to learn the minimum required, but nothing more. Like you don't want any of that. Like you can shortcut life basically. Like you don't need like 2 decades of work experience, because like 3 years in entrepreneurship it's basically worth like 2 decades. Like the degree to which it opens your mind and your brain and your understanding of leadership and your relationship to other people, it all changes. It's way more powerful than a university degree. Don't waste your time studying. If you're a genuine entrepreneur, you only do implementation and practice. And you will have to study, and you will be stuck, and you'll be like, I am so lost. I need an audiobook right now. Like I have no fucking clue what to do. I need my audiobook. You'll have those moments. I've had them, but like, don't study unless you're having that moment. If you do know what to do, if you do know what the next thing you need to do to push your business forward is, do that thing. And only once you get stuck, start doing some learning. That's what's worked for me, honestly, is just be very practical and hands-on. So that's it. Any more questions? We'll open up the floor. Dragos, do you want to jump in? How should we end this? Is he even there? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was scared. So should we wrap this up?
So I don't know if we don't have any more questions, I assume.
Yeah, it looks like I've answered all 13.
Okay, that's awesome.
Unlucky set.
I think you stop sharing, and
okay, so I'll stop sharing. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Please provide your feedback to Dragos. It's the first paid presentation for AI Geeks. And yeah, come to the next one. I guess there's webinar. There's another webinar coming up in a week or so.
Yeah, so starting now we have webinars every week. All of them are free, but if you're generous to help us pay for Zoom, because that's everything we are actually paying right now, you can get a pay ticket.
Okay.
But we have a small poll right now. If I find the button, I'll put it here. Okay, launch the poll. So unfortunately, I cannot get more information, more like in a text format. I was hoping for some comments about how good was Brad, but I cannot. So what you can do, you can press yes or no, but you
It's a
probably,
statistical metric,
yes,
data-based, not non-qualitative.
we'll use the data.
Oh,
And
Pravin is asking, how will the video be shared? Are you going to post that somewhere?
yes, so I'll send an email. It won't be public because this was a paid, for most of the people was a paid program. But with everybody who participated or who paid for this, I'll share it maybe in a couple of days.
Okay, sweet.
I was trying to say something when you interrupted me, and I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, no problem. Sorry.
They're joking. So just thank you, Brad. Thanks a lot for your participation tonight. Probably in a few months you'll come again, like you did 6 months ago and 6 months ago, and so on and so forth. I think it was very useful for those who like to start a business. And I'm sure many people will reach you personally with questions, but also send us either to him or me on LinkedIn, or how you like, some feedback with more text about this seminar, and how would you like to have more seminars like this in the future.
Yeah. If you're going to message me, actually, just send me an email directly. It's probably better. And it will take me a little while to respond. Just, my habits have been totally thrown off by this whole pandemic thing.
Yes. Okay, but, so I think that's the end for tonight. I'll leave the slideshow still on and the poll a bit on, so you can give us feedback. We are looking for your feedback directly on LinkedIn. You can find us both there. And I would like to thank again Brad, and thank you all for joining us for over 2 hours now. So thank you for sticking up, and we hope it was useful for you. So have a good night and see you next week.
Thank you, Jarius.